Comments on the first episode got right to the heart of the matter. If these are assembled rolls, what actually separates standard from premium? That is the point of this test. I have not opened this package yet, so this is the first time either roll is coming out on camera. Inside should be one 20 coin standard Morgan roll and one 10 coin limited Morgan roll. This is the 20 coin standard roll. I'm going to keep the order intact and log each coin as S1 through S20. For this episode, this will be a table level reveal only. I'll be looking at the date, mint mark, basic condition, any obvious problems, and whether the roll gives us anything interesting enough to challenge the standard label. The deeper evidence pass comes next. Right now, we're finding out what was actually inside this roll. Now, this is S1, 1883. Looks like we've got some abrasions and scuffing on the cheek. All right, 1883 Philly. Reverse looks a little bit stronger. But, all right, we've got an 1883 Philly. As S1, that gets put into its own slip, and we will set that there for the time being. All right, now every coin is going to get a review front and back with the buyer view from the table cam before we determine whether or not the scope will change anything. All right, here's an 1882. That, again, looks like a decent surface. From a luster standpoint, there are several marks and abrasions we'll need to take a closer look at. All right, that's an 1882 Philly. Reverse looks decent. All right, that is S2. S2 is an 82 Philly. All right, S3 is an 1899. Now, that luster I'm a little concerned about. That may need another exam there. All right, 1899 O. Reasonable strike. I've seen worse. Again, luster, I'm not too sure about this one. I mean, it's almost, well, it might be okay. We'll probably end up taking a look at that one on the scope. All right, so S3 is an 1889 O. S4. All right, that is an 1881 that is very likely to be an F, and it is. It's a pretty good strike. Seems to have reasonably good luster. Again, this table view is what most people see when they buy a coin online. I don't settle for that. This surface may be a little suspect on the obverse. We'll have to take a closer look at that one. All right, that is S4 and is an 81S. All right, S5. 1883, looking at the hairline, that's probably going to be in New Orleans. And it is. And again, luster, not terrible. We do have marks and abrasions that we'll need to get a closer look at. All right. That's the first 5. S5 is an 83.0. Now, just a quick moment of housekeeping. I did purchase a new microscope that will greatly improve my ability to do surface examinations. Unfortunately, it won't be here for another couple of days. So what we're doing today is the first pass reveal. We're giving you the buyer view, and then those coins that look like they warrant it, we will put on the scope for not quite the same surface examination, but a much better look at what the surfaces reveal. All right, this one, S6, is an 1886 Philly. I'm sorry, 1896 Philly. All right, that is S6. Next up, we've got S7. All right, 1897. Well, that surface may be a little bit worthy of another exam. All right, 1897 Philly. All right, that's S7 is a 97P. All right, here is S8. 1898. That was got a decent surface, I think. All right. That's a pretty good strike on the eagle's breast. We'll see how that holds up to further scrutiny if need be. All right, 1898 Philly. S8. All right, S9. Getting close to halfway. 1884. That one's been beaten up pretty hard. Surface luster is not what I would expect. That may require an additional examination right there. And that is a New Orleans. But I don't know. All right, S9 is an 1884 O. All right, halfway through. S10 is another 1884. All right, that surface looks a little bit better, luster-wise. All right, another 84O. So we've got our first duplicate. All right, I think that one is a little more legit uncirculated. All right, S10 is an 84O. All right, so at the halfway point, the standard roll is starting to define what the premium roll is going to have to try to beat. Okay, moving on. This is S11. Let's get the obverse view. 1886 with a little, I don't know, that luster might be okay. 1886 Philly. S11 is an 86p. Moving on to S12. All right, moved into the 20th century. There's a 1902 with decent luster, but some marks. And that's a New Orleans. All right, S12 is an 020. S13. 1921, final year Morgan. 21 Philly. Very shiny, but leads me to be a little bit suspicious the way that luster flows. It kind of doesn't do what you would want to see. All right. S13 is a 21p. S14. Another 21. Yeah, similar questionable luster. All right, another 21 Philly. All right, S14 is a 21p. S14. I'm sorry, S15. All right, 1881. All right, I like the way that cartwheels. All right, 81 Philly. Okay, S15 is an 81p. All right. We're now 15 coins in. This is no longer just a mystery. It's becoming a measurable standard roll. All right, let's move on to S16. Got an 1886. All right, I like the way that luster moves. All right, 86 Philly. That one doesn't look half bad. Okay, S16 is an 1886p. S17, 1882, with borderline luster flow. All right, that's an 82 San Francisco. That's pretty flashy. All right, S17 is an 82S. S18. Oh, nice little toner. Look at this. All right, we've got an 1885. 85 New Orleans. With an interestingly toned obverse. All right, S18 is an 85O. Second to the last coin, we've got S19, another 82, and this one is an O. All right, S19 is an 1882 O. All right, last but hopefully not least, we have S20. Obverse, 1885. Reasonably good luster, but almost questionable. All right, another 85 New Orleans. All right. S20, 1885 O. Okay, so that is the standard roll. 20 Morgan dollars, shown front and back, logged in order from S1 through S20. Before the scope changes anything, this is the buyer view baseline. This is what the roll delivered at the table, and this is what premium will eventually have to beat. But this is not the final verdict on the standard roll. A table view can tell us a lot. It will show the date, the mint mark, the general overall look, the brightness, any obvious problems, and which coins make us pause. But it cannot fully answer the question. So the next step is a follow-up episode. In that episode, every standard coin is going to go over to scope 1. We'll look at each coin as a full coin first, then we'll step in for closer magnification where the surface or details need more attention. When full coin luster behavior matters, we'll use the turntable or controlled light movement to see whether the surface actually behaves the way an uncirculated Morgan should. And for the coins that need deeper surface evidence, the ones with questionable shine, possible hairlines, friction breaks, haze, residue, or anything that might affect grading potential, we'll move those over to the other microscope for much closer macro examination. That is where the first impression has to survive. The standard roll has now set the buyer view baseline. The next episode decides which of these coins actually hold up under light, magnification, and surface proof. Then the limited roll gets its turn. So, before the scope changes the story, lock in your call. Did this standard roll look better than expected? About right for the claim? Weaker than the claim? Or do we really need the scope before deciding? Next up, the standard roll goes under the scope.